Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Concordia's Matthew Swift and Monica Crowley of the U.S. Department of State.
Thank you.
Monica, it's during what is probably one of the busiest weeks of the year for you, someone in your position. I cannot tell you what it means to have you as our closing speaker of the 15th Concordia Annual Summit. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. It's my honor and pleasure to be here. And as I told you backstage and prior to this, I've been a longtime admirer of what you do here at Concordia. So it's such a joy to make my maiden voyage with you here and to close out this magnificent summit. I've been following what you've been doing online. It's been fantastic all week.
One thing I want everyone in the audience to know is we first met when I was an intern at Fox News, and you never forget people who take that time to acknowledge and spend time with a young person, me at the time as an intern, and you did exactly that, and I've never forgotten it. So it's great to have you and coming full circle, which I love.
Here we are.
So I want to talk about what this week means, and then bigger picture, I want to talk about what you are doing as the Chief of Protocol of the United States government, because it feels like you're changing the role a little bit. It feels like you are taking this role and putting it into overdrive in terms of what protocol means, what your presence means, how we host visiting dignitaries. First, talk a little bit about exactly what the role of Chief of Protocol is, and then let's talk about this week when you're really the host of world leaders from all around the world.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. And actually, we rolled into UN General Assembly Week on the heels of the UK state visit. So we had a couple of days in London with the King and the Queen, Prince and Princess of Wales. So when we talk about protocol, both of these weeks are our Super Bowls. So we have done back-to-back Super Bowls over the last week and a half. Thank you for acknowledging the Chief of Protocol role. I think one of the big reasons why President Trump wanted me in this role after years on television and working in his first administration is that he did want to elevate the image of the United States around the world. And protocol is such an integral part in terms of the ceremony and the symbolism of the United States and the exercise of soft power. So we all know President Trump is very good at exercising hard power, and the United States of America is the quintessential leader in terms of hard power. But soft power also plays a critical role. This is diplomacy, of course, but protocol is an extension of that, and it is in service of America's national security and foreign policy and diplomatic goals. So what we do is try to create the optimal environment for the most robust, effective diplomacy to be carried out by our nation's diplomats, starting, of course, with the President of the United States, the Vice President, and the Secretary of State.
And how would you say things have gone in your first few months? You officially took your office in May, as I understand it,
right?
And you've had a whirlwind couple months hosting world leaders throughout, but also, as you said, you also travel with the president when he travels overseas. What are some key highlights you want to acknowledge on that?
Well, yes, I was confirmed by the Senate in mid-May and assumed my duties then. And one thing I think we can all agree on is that President Trump never stops. We were talking about this backstage. He has superhuman energy. And so therefore, the rest of us need to have superhuman energy. For example, we did just come back from the UK state visit, and then the president engaged all day yesterday. He had countless bilateral meetings and then hosted a reception with the First Lady at night. And those of us in protocol executed all of those bilateral meetings, made sure that the environment and the atmosphere was created in terms of the precision, the flags, the placement, the introductions, making sure that everything, the stage is set so that the president can really maximize his time with these diplomats. And then, of course, he went back to Washington last night, and we just heard that tomorrow at the White House, we have 2 world leaders coming in for back-to-back bilateral meetings. So this president has this incredible energy store, and he's using it to great effect on the world stage in terms of resolving long-standing conflicts. He likes to talk about how he has ended 7 prominent conflicts in the world, many of which have been going on for decades. He really is driven by, obviously, strategic imperatives that serve America's national interests. He's also driven by a very authentic desire for peace and a desire to see the killing stopped, whether it's Israel, Gaza, or Russia, Ukraine. He is genuinely driven by that desire. So it's our job to make sure that he has everything that he needs, as well as world leaders and their delegations, that they have everything that they need to really engage in the most optimal diplomacy to achieve those goals.
I want to get into, though, why protocol matters. I remember we were holding a summit overseas, and the front row of the main plenary had gotten full, and the mayor of the city that we were in was coming, and so we reserved a seat in the second row for him. That almost resulted in our entire partnership with that city collapsing by that one piece. And so I just want to set for everybody why this matters so much. But my question for you is, I feel like most people assume these things are planned months in advance. I thought it was a very interesting demonstration of how the world has changed when you were in Alaska hosting President Putin, and then 36 hours later, you're hosting, I think it was 7 leaders from Europe, including President Zelensky, who flew in with, 36 hours notice. So bring us behind the scenes of that in those 36 hours.
Absolutely. So once again, President Trump never stops. And because he comes from the private sector and not government or the public sector, he expects everything to be done right away, as he should. So he had a call with President Putin, I think it was on a Monday or a Tuesday, and they agreed to meet, and they settled on the location of Alaska. So that Friday, we went back and forth to Alaska in one day. So we're all chronically jet lagged, for sure, except for the president. He's never jet lagged. But we went back and forth to Alaska so that the president could meet with President Putin. And we spent the entire day on the ground. They had hours of meetings, the President Putin, the delegations, et cetera. They did a press conference. And then we boarded Air Force One to come back to Joint Base Andrews. And we're flying into the night. Alaska's 4 hours behind, so we're coming back into the night. And at about 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, we're still on the aircraft, Secretary Rubio came back to where I was sitting, and he said, Ambassador? And I said, yes. He said, I have a little bit of news for you. And I said, okay, what is it? And he said, we have President Zelensky at 1 p.m. on Monday. Now, setting up a bilateral meeting for a leader usually does take quite a while, but we have learned with President Trump to manage these kinds of things really, really quickly. So I said, okay, that's doable. We will make it happen. This is what we do. And then he said, wait, I have one more detail for you. And I said, okay, what is that? And he said, well, it's not just President Zelensky. We have 7 other European leaders coming in, including heads of government, heads of state, President Macron, the British Prime Minister, the head of the European Commission. So we had 36 hours to organize a multilateral meeting for 8 world leaders. It was President Zelensky's visit, but we had the 7 other world leaders coming in, and we didn't sleep for an additional 2 days while we organized and made sure that everything was being done with great precision. We have the military involved, military aids. Each motorcade is timed to come in order of precedence, and the world leaders were brought in one by one, and then, of course, the meetings were underway. But it was a day-long working meeting. So everything from making sure that President Zelensky had everything that he needed, along with his delegation, right down to the flowers on the table. All of those details, again, are an exercise in soft power and enhancing America's image on the world stage, and also making sure that the president has what he needs in a setting that is conducive to these kinds of productive conversations.
What do you say to those who see it as just purely ceremonial or symbolic?
Well, it is that, for sure. But again, all of that is of a piece. So we just came from the UK state visit, and the British have protocol down to an art and a science. And again, it leaves an impression. First, it creates an environment that is very welcoming, and allows for these kinds of sometimes very difficult conversations to be had in an environment that makes it easier for those conversations. But the pomp and the circumstance, what you're talking about, is such a critical role because it leaves an impression on the visiting dignitaries about respect. It's respect for them. It's respect for their countries. It's respect for the conversations that they're about to have with the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, and others in the US government. It plays an absolutely critical role in conveying that, first of all, we care. Secondly, we want these conversations to be productive. And third, that they are welcome back.
Talk to us about the UN General Assembly and yesterday. How was the engagement at the UN? How were the bilaterals? And bring us behind the scenes into everything that transpired yesterday.
Sure. So when the president nominated me for this job, I had so many people, Matt, come to me and say, oh, Chief of Protocol, you have the best job in all of Washington. And I kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. And now that I've been in the job, I can honestly say I really do have the best job in all of Washington. The UN General Assembly week, this was the one warning that former chiefs gave to me. They said, UNGA week, forget it, that you will not sleep, it's wall to wall. And that was true. By the way, in all of these positions, the people who have held these positions prior to you, for the most part, welcome you with open arms. And this is a bipartisan endeavor. And it happened to me in the first Trump administration when I served as Assistant Secretary of Treasury. Former Assistant Secretaries for Public Affairs, which was the position I had, they invited me to lunch. They gave me great advice. And again, this crosses the aisle. I have come to know former chiefs of protocol going all the way back to Lyndon Johnson's presidency. Lloyd Hand is about 96 years old and absolutely wonderful. I've had the benefit, Lucky Roosevelt, who served as chief under President Reagan, I've had the benefit of tremendous advice from these former chiefs. And they all warned me about UN General Assembly Week. So yesterday, our day started at about 7 o'clock in the morning, ended at about 10:30 at night. Very long day. I was with the president throughout the entire day. And he began his day by delivering his speech on the floor to the general session, which was broadcast.
There were a few issues. You had escalator issues, you had teleprompter
issues. There was an escalator
issues.
issue, and there was a teleprompter issue, yes, and they are investigating both of those incidents. And then after that, after he delivered his speech, he had a series of bilateral meetings which all took place on the UN grounds. I think you saw coverage of some of them. He saw President Zelensky. He saw several other world leaders yesterday as well. And those are usually back-to-back meetings involving the president and maybe a few others for delegation purposes. And then after that, he hosted a multilateral meeting with members of the Gulf states, talk about Israel and Gaza. And then he retreated. He had a couple of minutes of downtime, not all that much. And then he and the First Lady hosted a big reception at the Palace Hotel for about 140 heads of state and their spouses or foreign ministers. And my team and I have an extraordinary team. I cannot do this without them. They are total professionals. They're
How big is your
really,
team?
really
I assume
incredible.
it's a couple hundred people.
Well, that would be nice, but no, I have about 70
Okay.
people doing all of this. So we have a visits team. We have a team that oversees Blair House, which is the president's guest house. So visiting world leaders, when the president wants to extend an invitation to them to stay at Blair House, we take care of them during their stay. We have diplomatic partnerships, we have diplomatic affairs, and major events. So for example, next year, the United States will be hosting the G20 here in the United States. The leader track will be in Miami at Trump Doral. And That's my team and I organizing all of that, the G20, making sure everything runs according to plan.
Well-
And the thing about protocol, Matt, is that when things go right and everything looks beautiful, nobody kind of recognizes it, but if something goes wrong,
Yes.
everybody knows.
Yes, no, I can relate a little bit, certainly not at this scale, but with this summit, people say, what's it like planning the summit? And I said, it's really like having 4,000 people for 3 days and 500 of them are the bride. It's like running a wedding, pretty much.
That's exactly right.
So it's quite the logistical process, but again, if you don't get it right, it can change
It can
an
change.
entire trajectory, like that example I gave with the mayor. It can change an entire trajectory of a partnership or relationship if you don't get those pieces right.
Yes, and so we want to make sure that we handle everything with great detail and precision and care, because the president deserves that, the foreign dignitaries deserve that, the American people, and frankly, the world deserves that.
Well, so this is our last session, our last main stage session. I mean, I don't even know where to start on what we've done in the last 3 days. We've had 100 main stage sessions,
Right.
over 70 roundtables, brokered over 800 private meetings in this building. In the last 3 days, we've had speakers ranging from the new president of Syria, being interviewed by General David Petraeus, who I started the conversation talking about how he had met him 20 years earlier when he was in a prison in Iraq, and now he's the president of Syria. We hosted Elmo and Goldie Hawn in the same morning, the CEO.
Speaking of Goldie Hawn, she starred in a movie in 1984 called Protocol, which I recently saw once again. It's a really cute movie.
Is she the
She's
chief of protocol?
fantastic.
What's the...
In the movie?
Yeah.
Well, she plays a cocktail waitress
Okay.
who happens to stop an assassination attempt of a world leader and ends up as chief of protocol, or in the protocol office. Yeah, it's very cute.
Should have been talking about that yesterday. But no, I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been a tremendous 15th Concordia Annual Summit, and I couldn't think of a better way to wrap it up than with Ambassador Monica Crowley.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. A pleasure. Thank you, Matt.